Thomas opened his bag and showed Sarah what was inside. What Sarah saw fascinated her. The bag was filled with science journals, organized notes, pens, and an old but still working laptop. Everything was neatly organized. Sarah thought she knew everything about the homeless man who sat outside her restaurant every day. But when she discovered what was hidden in his torn backpack, her entire understanding of kindness would change forever. Sarah Mitchell was a 23-year-old college student working part-time at a fast food restaurant called Tony's Burger Palace in Chicago's busy downtown district. A senior majoring in psychology, Sarah worked 5 shifts a week to pay for her studies. Her family came from a small town in Illinois, and Sarah was trying to navigate the challenges of big city life on her own. Tony's Burger Palace was a small but bustling place on Michigan Avenue, tucked away among skyscrapers. Open from 6 a.m. to midnight, the restaurant was packed with white-collar workers rushing to work, tourist families, and college students looking for late-night fast food. Sarah's manager, Mike O'Connor, was a burly 45-year-old former police officer. A father of 2, he took the job to save for retirement and placed a high value on customer satisfaction. Every morning, during his shift, which began at 8 a.m., Sarah would see the same man sitting on the metal bench right next to the restaurant door. The man appeared to be in his 50s, wearing a worn brown army jacket, jeans with patches on the knees, and old sneakers with a hole in his left shoe. His hair was long and unkempt, with a dirty gray beard that hung down to his chest. He always carried a torn blue backpack and a plastic bag filled with papers. The other employees called him Crazy Tom. No one knew his real name. Jennifer, a 19-year-old college freshman, was constantly stressed because she had to send money home. She was the one most bothered by his presence. "This guy scares the customers," she constantly complained. David, the cashier, was a 26-year-old theater major who hadn't yet realized his dreams. He, too, considered him a detriment to the business. The man usually sat in the same spot from 8 in the morning until 6 at night, occasionally muttering to himself and writing diligently in a small notebook. Sarah was curious about his writing. Sometimes he would smile at the notebook. Sometimes he would look sad. When customers asked him for money, he would politely say, "No, thank you. I don't need it," and respectfully bow his head. This behavior surprised Sarah, as most homeless people were accustomed to asking for money. The man's daily routine was quite regular. He would arrive at 7:30 a.m., clean the bench with the small piece of cloth he'd brought with him, and place his bag and purse neatly at his feet. At noon, he'd usually go to the nearby park, drink from the fountain, and wash his hands and face. He'd wake up at 6 p.m. and leave, cleaning the bench again. This behavior caught the attention of Sarah's inner psychologist. It was a cold, rainy Monday morning in November. Sarah arrived at work as usual to find the restaurant manager, Mike O'Connor, engaged in a heated argument with the man. Mike was a large man with a consistently stern tone, but this morning he was particularly irritated. "Listen, you can't sit here every day. Customers are being disruptive. Last night, the district manager came and saw you. He said, 'How is this working? I'll have to call the police.'" Mike was shouting. The man replied, calmer than ever, "Mr. O'Connor, I'm not bothering anyone. I'm just resting. This is public space. I have the right to sit here under American law. It may be public space, but this is my business. Go somewhere else. Go to Navy Pier. Go to Lincoln Park. You don't have to be here." Sarah stared out the window. The man's speech caught her attention. He enunciated his words clearly and followed grammatical rules. It was very different from any homeless person Sarah had ever encountered. Jennifer shouted from behind the counter, "Mike's right. This guy's been making customers uncomfortable as long as he's here. A woman asked me yesterday, 'Do I have to walk past him with my kids?'" David interjected, And those bags smell. He's causing a sanitation problem. Sarah couldn't resist anymore and interjected, Mike, he's not hurting anyone. He's just sitting there. And Jennifer, do you know what's in those bags? Maybe he has important belongings. Mike shot her an angry look. Sarah, you work here, you defend him. Customers come in and complain. They say, we don't want to come here because of the homeless. If you don't want to lose business, don't take the customer's side. Meanwhile, a small crowd had gathered outside. Some business people were watching. Sarah realized how embarrassing the man was. He stood up, gathered his bag and said, I don't want to cause any trouble. I'm sorry if I bothered you, and walked away. As Sarah watched him leave, she noticed that his walk had also caught her attention. He stood straight, his steps measured. He didn't have the shy, stooped posture of a typical homeless person. Just then, she saw a piece of paper fly from the man's bag in the wind. The paper landed in the flower bed in front of the restaurant. Sarah wanted to get out quickly, but Mike's gaze stopped her. It's time, Sarah. The customers are starting to arrive. At the end of her shift, Sarah went outside to retrieve the fallen paper. Although torn and dirty, it contained complex mathematical formulas and notes in English, Spanish, and French. At the bottom was the words, Dr. Thomas Whitmore, MIT Physics Department. Sarah's heart raced. MIT was Massachusetts Institute of Technology, one of the world's most prestigious universities. Was this paper his? Or had she found it in the trash? The next day, the man didn't show up. Sarah thought about him all day. In the evening, she Googled Dr. Thomas Whitmore, MIT. The results shocked her. On the screen was a photograph of a handsome suit-wearing man. The caption read, Dr. Thomas Whitmore was a professor of quantum mechanics in the MIT Physics Department. He resigned abruptly in 2019. Sarah examined the photo more closely. If it weren't for the hair and beard, the man resembled the man sitting on the bench, but she wasn't sure. The man didn't return for the next few days. Sarah did more research on Dr. Whitmore. On MIT's website, she learned that he had done groundbreaking work in quantum physics, received numerous awards, and published in prestigious scientific journals. One article wrote, Dr. Whitmore's work forms the foundation of future generations of computer technology. The quantum algorithms he developed could revolutionize fields ranging from cryptography to climate modeling. Another source read, Thomas Whitmore is one of the young scientists solving the most difficult problems in quantum mechanics. Whitmore, a professor at 41, was considered a rising star in the scientific world. But after 2019, there was no trace of him. He had seemingly vanished from the world. His last article was published in March 2019. He hadn't attended any conferences or published anything since then. Sarah also searched MIT's old student journals. At the end of 2019, a small piece of news broke. Our esteemed faculty member, Dr. Thomas Whitmore, has resigned for personal reasons. We wish him the best in his future endeavors. Such a brief, formal statement struck Sarah as suspicious. More detailed explanations were usually given when professors retired or moved on to other universities. On Wednesday, Sarah arrived at work and saw the man on the bench again. This time, his bag was open and he had pulled out an old laptop. It had an MIT label on it. He was staring intently at the screen, occasionally making notes in his notebook. Sarah wanted to be absolutely certain. She went outside during her lunch break, and he mustered the courage to approach her. I'm sorry, he said gently. You dropped a paper a few days ago. The man looked up. His eyes looked tired but intelligent. He looked at Sarah and smiled slightly. You're the polite young lady who works here. Thank you. It's nothing really, just old notes. The formulas on them look very complex. Are you a mathematician? The man paused a little. Fear flashed in his eyes for a moment, then sadness. I used to do very different things. Sarah mustered her courage and asked, Dr. Whitmore, is that you? The man's expression changed completely. He quickly closed his laptop screen and put the notebook back in his bag. A look of surprise, then sadness, and finally despair came into his eyes. I haven't heard that name in a long time, he said quietly. How do you know? There were notes on the piece of paper that said MIT. I looked it up. Thomas, who knew his name now, took a long breath. Yes, I used to be Dr. Thomas Whitmore. Now I'm just Tom sitting on the bench. Sarah listened intently. Thomas began to tell his story. Yes, I was Dr. Thomas Whitmore. I was a quantum physics professor at MIT. My life was perfect. A beautiful home in Cambridge, a prestigious job, research funding, respected colleagues. I was traveling to conferences around the world. Even the Nobel Prize wasn't a distant dream, until I lost my wife, Emma. His voice trembled. Emma was diagnosed with aggressive brain cancer at the end of 2018, glioblastoma. The doctors said 6 months at most. At that moment, everything in my life became meaningless. What good was quantum mechanics if it couldn't save Emma? I quit my job to spend time with her. I spent all my money, my savings on her treatment. Experimental treatments, trips to Germany, private clinics in Switzerland, the best hospitals in America. We tried everything. I mortgaged my house. I cashed out my retirement fund. Thomas's eyes welled with tears. Emma lasted a year and 3 months. During that time, I had completely neglected my work. I had left my classes to assistant professors and abandoned my research projects. The MIT administration was initially understanding, but over time, their patience wore thin. They said, "Go back to work or quit." After Emma died, I tried to return, but I could no longer concentrate. I would stand in the lab, thinking I heard her voice. At home, I would smell her perfume. My projects were left unfinished, my papers unpublished. My colleagues moved away. Eventually, my house was foreclosed. The insurance company refused to cover the cost of the experimental treatment. I was left with $200,000 in debt. I had to officially leave MIT. Sarah's eyes welled with tears. I'm so sorry. But why didn't you apply to other universities? I applied. But in academia, taking a 3-year break means the end of your career. Colleagues said, Thomas has gone crazy. He's become unreliable. I went to job interviews, but the questions were always the same. Why did you leave MIT? Why did you take such a long break? When I told Emma's story, they thought it was too emotional, unprofessional. Eventually, I ended up here. Chicago was a cheap city with good libraries. I initially stayed at the YMCA, but when I ran out of money, I took to the streets. Sarah asked, surprised, "Why didn't you ask your family for help?" I don't have a family. Emma was everything to me. My friends also moved away after Emma passed away. Academics are strange people. They don't want to be around people who have personal problems. Thomas opened his bag and showed Sarah the contents. It was filled with scientific journals, notes, and an old laptop. I'm still doing research, he said. I go online at the city library. There's a project I started during Emma's illness. Quantum technology targeting cancer cells. Sarah looked inside the bag in surprise. Everything was neat and tidy, as if protected like precious treasures. Why don't you tell anyone? Explain your situation. Who? Everyone who knows me thinks Dr. Whitmore has gone crazy. A prestigious man, he's become homeless. Who would believe I'm still producing anything of value? Thomas took out his little notebook. This notebook contains everything I learned during Emma's treatment. My conversations with doctors, my readings, my own theories. As Sarah looked through the notebook, something caught her eye. One page read, Sarah, kind waitress. Beneath it was the note, psychology student, highly empathetic. Are you observing me? Thomas felt embarrassed. Sorry, old habit. Observing people, understanding their behavior. Emma was a psychologist too. You're like her. What was Emma like? Like you. Kind to people, unprejudiced. She saw details others overlooked. Sarah's thought occurred to her. Dr. Whitmore, what would happen if you completed your research? Maybe nothing. Maybe I could save people like Emma. But I don't have the lab or the funds to test it. That evening, when Sarah got home, she called her university advisor, Dr. Rebecca Chen. Professor Chen, I want to tell you about a very interesting situation. I met a scientist doing cancer research. The next day, Dr. Chen arrived at the restaurant with Sarah. Dr. Chen was surprised when they saw Thomas on the bench. Are you Dr. Thomas Whitmore from MIT? Thomas nodded shyly. I'm Rebecca Chen from the University of Chicago Medicine. I've read your quantum mechanics papers. What happened to you? Thomas briefly told his story. Dr. Chen listened intently. Can I see your research? A week later, Dr. Chen called Sarah with the good news. Thomas's research is incredible. His theories could take our current cancer treatment methods to a whole new level. Our university has offered him a research position. Sarah ran out of the restaurant, elated. Thomas was sitting in his usual spot, but this time his laptop was open, taking notes. Dr. Whitmore, I have great news. When Thomas looked up, Sarah saw something in his eyes she hadn't seen in a long time. Hope. 3 months later, Sarah visited the lab on the University of Chicago campus. Dr. Thomas Whitmore, dressed in a clean white lab coat, was working with his assistants. Sarah, how are you? He greeted her cheerfully. How are you? How's the research going? The initial test results are promising. The notes in Emma's notebook were more valuable than expected. Maybe her dream will come true. As they left the lab, Thomas turned to Sarah. You know, none of us would be here if it weren't for you. You saw my story worth listening to. Sarah smiled. We all have more stories than meet the eye, don't we? Yes, Thomas said. And sometimes just listening to those stories can change everything. That day, on her way home, Sarah passed Tony's Burger Palace. A new homeless man was sitting on the conveyor belt. Sarah stopped, approached him, and smiling said, Hello, how are you? Because now she knew everyone had a story waiting to be told. And sometimes, being heard can completely change a life. The most important lesson Sarah learned that day was this. Appearances are deceiving, and every person has a valuable story. Hidden in a homeless man's bag wasn't just his research notes. It was hope for all of humanity, and that hope was revealed through a small act of kindness.